What's up, everybody? I'm Stan.
I'm Mac.
And welcome to MES Tech, another episode of the hot mess of tech shows on the internet. What are we talking about today, Mac?
I did just remember we forgot beer. But we're also talking about a couple of... No, we're not doing the tech news yet.
We're talking about the 9900K.
Yes, a couple of videos planned. But yes, the release of the new Intel chips.
Yeah, so the release of the new Intel chips, they did that on that live stream that we talked about last week. It was on October 8th, where we saw everything that Intel had to offer, and we got some pretty serious claims about its performance versus AMD. Up to 50% of an improvement in gaming compared to a 2700X. And Intel released a whole bunch of different information, so this is the complete lineup of all the different refresh chips that are going to be coming out from Intel. So this includes things like the 9900K, the 9700K, the 9600K, the X series, so you've got things like the 9980XE, 9960X, 9940X, 9920X, 9900X. They ditched the quad-core or 8-core or 6-core version, so now you start at 8 cores, 16 threads, and move your way all the way up to 18 cores and 32 threads, unless you're talking about their whole Threadripper competitor, which was also announced, and it's an unlocked Xenon, 28 cores with 56 threads. Yeah, it's intense.
There's a lot of numbers in here, and I'm super excited for it.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to rain on Mac's parade.
Because they cheated. They didn't cheat.
Yeah, so we can't call it a cheat, and a lot of people have been talking about this all over the YouTube tech space, as well as, articles everywhere. So much to the point where the company, Principled Technologies, released a second report correcting some of their mistakes, even though the 9900K, which is going to be an 8-core, 16-thread machine, up to 5 gigahertz as far as turbo boosting on 2 cores, which means you're overclocking. Well, I tell you what, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
Let's talk about the major changes to the 9000 series, the 9th generation of consumer chips.
Cool.
So if we're talking about major, the first thing is that the thermal interface material, what goes between the heatsink and the silicon die, has been changed over from a thermal paste to an actual solder. So
Back to the solder.
So it's using STIM, or soldered thermal interface material. So older generation, like Core 2 Duos and i5s, i7s, earlier processors use soldered material, and they went away from it for this thermal paste. But now with the introduction of the soldered thermal interface material, you're going to be seeing a lot better temperatures on these higher performance chips right from the factory.
Speaking of which, I think my chip was one of the first generations that we switched over to the bad stuff.
Yeah, Mac's got a 4790K, which is an absolute badass of a machine. We're going to show it up on the channel in the near future, but it does have some problems with temperature.
It runs hot. And this is one of the things that hopefully I'll be fixing, but good news, Intel is doing the good thing from the get-go. It costs a little bit more in production, I assume, but at the same time, it's well worth it. I mean, we're talking delitting on some of the older generation stuff, changing CPU temps 10, 15, 20 C. Yeah, it's a big difference. So it's cool to see. AMD's also been doing it through pretty much their entire lineup of chips, so it's just...
the Ryzen processors are all soldered TIM, so it's basically they're either reverting back to what they used to do, or they're catching up to what AMD does, depending on your perspective. Right. The other thing that we're going to really focus on is that they only really talked about the 9600K, 9700K, and 9900K as far as consumer chips. Mm-hmm. So you've got your 6-core, 6-thread machine, you've got your 8-core, 8-thread machine, and then, of course, the 9900K, which is 8-core, 16 threads.
So they are throttling back on the hyper-threading.
Yeah, which is weird because they started that whole thing.
Yes, they started hyper-threading.
It's weird that AMD and Intel really bounce back and forth between technologies, because a lot of the architecture that we run now as far as multi-core chips are based off of AMD's first iteration. They really set the tone for multi-core processing. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about multi-core, multi-thread, that was definitely Intel's real thing, which they started way back before then.
Of course. And it's something that's very efficient. It pretty much doubles the throughput of any CPU's productivity.
Or at least gives you a reasonable increase. So it's not necessarily like they're real cores doing the actual computes, but they're doing a hell of a lot of the work. So the loss of multi-threading means that the 9700K, compared to a 6-core, 12-thread 8700K, it might not perform as well in applications like Premiere or Blender or someplace like that, where it can make use of the cores and the threads, especially if you're going clock for clock. So,
Right.
an 8-core machine that's, 5 gigahertz right from the start, that's fantastic. However, if you've got an 8700K that is capable of overclocking to 5 gigahertz, and if you've got a liquid cooling system, that's pretty achievable on the vast majority of the chips, or an 8086K, which was the special edition, and that was pretty much guaranteed to overclock to 5 gigahertz. So that is most likely going to perform better inside something like Cinebench or a productivity suite, but the 9900K or the 9700K actually in particular, without the hyperthreading, might still perform a little bit better in, say, like DirectX 12 applications or other things in terms of gaming that are going to take advantage of those extra 2 physical cores compared to the multi-threads.
Right. And those higher clock speeds, feasibly, we haven't seen any overclocking stuff yet with the huge 9900K.
Yeah, the 9900Ks. So the 9900Ks, we're actually just skipping over the 9600K because there's not really a lot to write home about. It's very similar in price to your 8600Ks. The performance is going to be very similar to the 8600Ks. The 9700K and the 8700K, they're different because they're trading off different ways of performing. But the 9900K is the first 8-core 16-thread CPU being released by Intel for consumers. And we're not talking high-end desktop because they've had that stuff before. But for consumers, people that are buying a Z370 or Z390 chipset, this is the first real time that you've had an option to have more than 6 cores on an Intel CPU die. We're gonna rain on Mac's parade a little bit because when Intel originally announced this, the 2700X was lagging behind in Ashes of Singularity by up to and if not over 50%. However, due to this report, we've realized that, and a lot of really good work by like Hardware Unboxed, Gamers Nexus, PC World, a lot of great places out there that had the opportunity to go to the Intel event, see all this press release material in advance. They did a lot of investigative work and they determined, if you've got a 2700X, they're actually debilitating. They're gimping that chip as part of the testing methodology. They were enabling game mode, which is really geared more towards Threadripper processors where you're dealing with 16, 24, 32 thread machines that don't necessarily, the games don't know what to do with that many cores. So by enabling game mode, it drastically reduces the number of cores so that way you can just focus the operations into that particular piece.
Primary cores per cache so that it can travel through the processor faster for games that aren't optimized for 32 cores. Then the re-release is with the actual stock stuff.
So creator mode, which is your stock operation for Ryzen 2700X, enables all 8 cores and 16 threads, which is far better utilized inside DirectX 12 and various other applications.
Shame on you, Intel.
Well, we can't necessarily say shame on Intel unless they gave specific guidelines as to how to test these particular chips, which we don't really know
they
about.
Would never do.
Nobody would ever do that. But the one thing to keep in mind is that until we get independent reviews that are going to be coming out October 19th, you've got to take some of these samplings with a bit of salt. You can't necessarily go by these guidelines 100% because, say that Ryzen is on optimized memory, clocking in 3200, 3600 megahertz. That is going to make a big difference due to the Infinity Fabric. However, it could also make a very similar difference on the Intel platforms. And then depending on what the final chips are versus the engineering samples, your overclockability for these things could take it well beyond the capabilities of the 2700X, even when overclocked. So that's something that you're going to need to pay attention to for direct comparisons.
Right, which is something that I'm really hoping for. Very high overclocking ability. It's something I like to do with my computers.
Yeah.
But they could be tapped out. Who knows? We haven't really seen yet. So
during the Intel demonstration, they did have an LN2 9900K setup that was hitting like 6.8 gigahertz on all cores. So there is the potential.
LN2 is what I'm going to do with my processor.
However, if you had something like a 360 millimeter radiator all-in-one cooler or a custom water cooling loop, I would say that with 5 gigahertz on the actual cores as the turbo frequency, the ability for most Intel machines to clock well beyond their turbo frequency by 300 to 500 megahertz isn't really out of the realm of possibilities. And with the thermal interface material of solder and with that increased capacity of cooling, it's most likely that you're going to be able to see 5.2, 5.3, 5.4 out of these 9900Ks, which is a completely different realm of consumer CPUs. So you can tell that we're pretty amped on a 9900K. The 9700K is a great change for Intel, but we're going to have to see how that trade-off of hyperthreading and cores really plays out for them in terms of performance. The 9600K, it's pretty much a wash compared to an 8600K, so it's not really a huge advantage or investment. But what we want to do is see if you wanted to build the best, the baddest, the biggest build for Big Blue's 9900K, what is that really going to take? So I sense a video coming along with something along those lines for you guys, so that way you can see what our take on building maybe a budget-based 9900K would look like as well. So
yeah, because we're not all made of money.
Yeah, we're definitely not all made of money. We might be made of credit, but not real money, you know.
Right. Just the crippling debt.
Just the crippling debt, just slowly weighed down by debt. So that's really the rundown as far as the 9th gen stuff, you guys. We're going to pour into this a lot more, and then as these things come out...
The blank white piece of paper?
Well, yeah, the possibly blank white piece of paper, but we're going to take a look at these reports, dive into them a lot deeper, and see exactly where we can make reasonable comparisons, because, well, you know, we're a new channel. We don't have any money, and it's really tough to do that kind of stuff for you guys, even though we want to.
Yes. We'd have a ton of fun playing around with LN2 and trying to break stuff, but, you know...
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet.
If you guys keep watching, we're probably going to get there. So that's it for the 9900K video. If you guys liked the video, as always, hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, hit the dislike button. Hit the comments down below, because we always want to really, you know, hear what you guys have for feedback on how we can make the channel better, or what kind of videos that you want to see from us, and how we could basically improve the channel viewing experience for you. And, you know, hit the bell and the notifications so that way you can see when the videos show up. But as always... see you next time. All right, so are we good? Are we good space-wise? Are we feeling it?
Yes.
I think we just looked up and down and up in tandem.